Welcome to chapter 3, and thanks for making it this far on job analysis. So let's go over what we're going to cover in today's lecture. So very straightforward lecture today. First, we're going to answer what is job analysis and, well, why do we even care about it? Next up, I'm going to load you with some fun terminology, introduce you to different types of job analysis, highlight the idea of competency modeling as an alternative to job analysis, and then finally, we'll talk about some of the purposes and outcomes of job analysis. So, quick warning here. This lecture will be very terminology heavy. So, please prepare yourself for probably the least engaging lecture of the semester. Despite the terminology and the terminology heaviness of this lecture, it's likely the most important topic in IO psychology. It serves as a foundation for topics like recruitment, selection, motivation, leadership, team dynamics, and much, much more. Well, what do I mean by this? Let's find out. So we begin at the beginning. What is job analysis? Well, a very static and boring definition is the process of defining a job in terms of its component tasks or duties and the knowledge or skills required to perform them. But for you to kind of take a little bit more hold of this information in your mind, it answers two primary questions. What do people do? Uh, what do people in this job do? What do they do like on a day-to-day basis? What are the tasks that they do? And what are the knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics that you need to accomplish this job? So more, again, focusing on the person. What do you need to do this job? So what tasks are required, and what do you need to have to do this job well?
So what? No. Who cares?
So what? Who cares, right? Um, well, everyone should care if you have a job because it helps with things like how well is the employee doing. It helps with performance appraisals. It helps um, identifying the need for selection tests. So what does the applicant actually need to know before they can be selected for the job? Um, the, in relation to performance appraisals, so what are the dimensions that need to be improved with the employees. So what do we need to train them on so they become better? And how important is this job to the organization? So it helps determine compensation as well. And as I said at the beginning, job analysis is the foundation for much of the work in IO psychology, especially the I side. Remember, that's selection, recruitment, training, etc. Another slide highlighting the importance of job analysis is that it produces three main outcomes. And we'll dive into this near the end of the lecture a little bit more. But these three main outcomes are a job evaluation, so how important is the job to the organization, job description, what incumbents do, how do they do it, why do they do that. You can see the results of the job analysis and job descriptions in, say, employment ads, so recruitment and selection. There's that parallel there. And also job specification, so the KSAOs, what the person needs for the job. So here we go. Here's where we start with the heavy terminology. Many folks describe the jobs based upon four, descriptors, terms: an element, a task, a position, and the job itself. An element is the smallest working unit of work activity. So when you think of Taylorism, that's what he was messing around with the time and motion studies, trying to organize elements to make the job more efficient. Um, if you gather all of these elements together, you get a task. So it's at a little bit higher level of abstraction, So it's multiple elements, the activity of work that is performed to achieve a specific objective. Um, these, once we go up pretty much a much higher level abstraction, you put all these tasks together and you get a position, which is um, comprised of tasks performed by an individual in an organization. And then finally, you get a job, which is a collection position similar enough for one person to basically do it. Um, and so I know this is kind of abstract, so let's go through an example. I want to introduce you to Holden, our hipster barista, and he'll be joining us throughout this lecture and perhaps throughout the semester on our journey of learning about industrial and organizational psychology. Take Holden as an example, who is a hipster barista. If we broke down his tasks, one of his or job, one of his elements would be to grind the beans, right? Next would be to a task would be to brew coffee, right? You grind beans to brew coffee, and brew coffee is a whole bunch of separate steps kind of amalgamated together. His position, of course, is assistant brewmaster. That's one of the things that he does on the job. But if you combine everything he does, from interacting with the customer to being an assistant brewmaster to, probably doing some stocking and stuff, that is what we call barista.
So now that we got that down, let's talk about different types of job analysis. Let's do a little rewind for a second and see if y'all recall something from the Intro to IO lecture. Essentially, the difference between Taylorism, stuff that Frederick Taylor did, the time and motion studies, and the Hawthorne experiments. Essentially, those are two clear examples of task-focused thinking and person-focused thinking. And and you'll see that throughout the semester, that sort of theme, task versus person-focused thinking. And your first example of that is job analysis.
So as I kind of highlighted earlier, we're going to be breaking things down into two primary categories and types of job analyses into two primary categories, that is. First, we have these task-oriented job analyses, which describe, well, the tasks that people do. We'll talk about two types, specific types of task-oriented job analyses, the task inventory approach and the functional job analysis. We'll also cover some worker-oriented approaches, which focuses on the sorts of what sort of characteristics do people need in order to perform a job well. Specifically, we'll cover three different examples: the job element method, the PAQ questionnaire, and the common metric questionnaire. But let's get started with the task-oriented approach. So our first job analysis technique that we're covering is the task-oriented approach, which aims to answer what are the tasks of this job. There are general steps that job analysts use when using this approach. First, you ask folks, essentially, what do you do here?
What you do at Initech is you take the specifications from the customers and you bring them down to the software engineers.
Yes, that's right.
Well, then I just have to ask, why couldn't the customers just take them directly to the software people, huh?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because engineers are not good at dealing with customers.
So you physically take the specs from the customer?
Well, no, my secretary does that, or they're faxed.
So then you must physically bring them to the software people.
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
What would you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
This is typically answered by subject matter experts or SMEs. You'll see that term used a lot throughout this semester. The easiest way to think of a SME is that people who know what they're talking about, well, hopefully. The second step in compiling is compiling these task statements, which we'll go into a little bit more detail in a second. Lastly, you ask incumbents, which are people who already work on the job, to rate these task statements concerning whether they do this or not. I mean, there's always a chance that the SMEs that you interviewed are wrong. How important is this job or this task to your job, and how much time do you spend on this task? So let's take a look at a quick example. All right, so here are some examples of task statements, and let's see if I can get this to work. Yes. Ooh, laser pointer, nice. This will help you digest the material a little bit better, make the slides more dynamic. Nice, nice, nice. All right. All right, as you can see here, these task statements are in line with the conceptual definition of a task given at the beginning of the lecture. For instance, grading exams is an aggregate of interrelated elements, but isn't high enough on the level of abstraction to represent a position. Say this grading exams right here. Yes, good job. All right. Anywho, these task statements are presented to the worker, so the incumbents, and they're asked to fill out this sheet, and it gives you a pretty good idea of what folks are doing on the job, how important these tasks are to the job, and how much time they're spending on each of these tasks.
Hopefully, you're beginning to see how job analysis is related to other areas like compensation or training or selection or recruitment. For instance, if a person is spending the majority of their time doing something that isn't necessarily essential to their job, the company may want to think about breaking that part into a separate position or doing some sort of training that increases the speed in which that essential task gets done, or less essential task, or maybe get rid of the task entirely. But really start to think about how what we're getting from these job analyses are related to other areas of IO, like selection and recruitment. You may see a question like that on your exam.
Next up, we have the functional job analysis, which is very similar to the task inventory approach. The first two steps are exactly the same, but the last is more task focused. So these first two steps, you start with asking SMEs and then compiling task statements, but what we ask after that, the incumbents and the subject matter experts, is different. So we ask them the degree to which these tasks concern data, people, and things. Now, I know you probably can define these three terms all on your own, but I've provided some definitions for the specific context. So with respect to data, is the extent to which the job requires handling information, ideas, and facts. So if you're doing this a lot, it would be rated higher on data. A job that is rated higher on people dimension happens when if you're interacting with folks more often, and this can be interactions with customers, clients, supervisors, basically anybody. So if you have to have more, people skills or soft skills, you'd be rated higher on this people dimension. And lastly, the extent to which it concerns things is more reflective of, say, the physical requirements, so just strength, speed, and coordination needed to accomplish the job. So this is all pretty abstract. So let's take a deeper look into what one of these task statements would look like. All right. So the structure of the task statement begins with a verb, so what gets done, followed by immediate uh, object, what is what is it done to, and then finally optional infinitive phrase, basically the how and or why the action is accomplished. So let's bring back Holden for his first example. Holden would say that one of his tasks is to brew immaculate caffeinated fluids to inspire self-transcendence. In order to generalize this task statement across multiple coffee shops, you probably want to say something like brews coffee for customers. Side note, can we take a minute to appreciate and admire how ridiculous this stock footage is? Like, well, with that previous example that with the coffee, just pick it up. Like, what are you doing? Like, it's not gonna change anything. That the coffee's going to weigh the same. I guess that's what you're doing there. Just pick it up. Pick it up, man. Just pick it up. Anyways, next slide.
The functional job analysis holds a pretty significant distinction among all the different types of job analysis. In particular, it was used as the basis for the Dictionary of Occupational Titles. Now, in the 1930s, the Department of Labor wanted to construct this, Dictionary of Occupational Titles. And so what they did is they sent hundreds of job analysts all around the country to basically classify these jobs using functional job analysis. Their initial data set had about 12,000 jobs, and as we'll talk about later on, it's only grown from there. So that means there's 12,000 different classifications of job based upon data, people, and things. In fact, coffee maker was one of them. So let's check that one out to see what Holden would be classified as.
So Holden would be classified as a coffee maker, which, seems pretty straightforward. The first three codes here places the job into an occupational category, and they're organized in a hierarchy. So Holden primarily works in a service occupation. Secondary to that, he works a service occupation within the food and beverage preparation businesses, and they don't have anything specific for coffee maker. So then he's given an additional code as for 7. Right, laser pointer, I can use that. 7 here for miscellaneous food and preparation outcomes. Now these next 3 codes are the data and people and things that we were talking about earlier. So Holden would be rated relatively high with respect to data. Again, relatively high with respect to taking in for people, so taking instructions and helping other people would be part of his job as a coffee maker, and relatively low on manipulating things, not a lot of physical manual labor. That little 0-10 at the end is just to differentiate similar jobs from one another. So there might be a similarly coded occupation with this 317.684, and then there's like 10, I guess, of them before coffee maker. So what does Holden think of that? He doesn't like it very much, probably because of the taking instructions and helping other people. Oh well. So here's a bit of a more detailed example of a professor. As you can see, we still have occupational codes and titles right up here, as well as industry designation, education that's typically given. There's not a lot of information about how that is developed. It's not through these interviews, so we can ignore that. There's also this lead statement, which summarizes the job into one sentence. So for me, it would be conducts college or university courses for undergraduate or graduate students, which is nice. And we have these task element statements. So these are, say, brews immaculate caffeinated beverages for self-transcendence or whatever Holden did here, just in line. And these are pretty representative of all faculty members. They would be doing something like this. But we also have this may items here. So may items are basically there to um, account for discrepancies across that arose during initial interviews. So some professors may do this if they're more research oriented, so they may have more grant focused activities. Others may be more teaching focused, and so they wouldn't have those grant activities listed here.
Now, the Department of Labor didn't stop in the early 1930s. In fact, kept adding different occupations until the 1990s when it was replaced by ONET, which we'll get to in just a little bit.
Now, there are some clear pros and cons to using these task-oriented approaches. First, they serve their purpose well, right? They basically are great for classifying tasks into groups, and they're more or less objective, right? That is, the biases that are typically an issue um, when looking at, say, some of the personal qualifications of a job aren't apparent in this method. However, they're pretty narrowly focused, right? We'll get into the cons here. They focus too much on um, the particular tasks of the job. Also, tasks aren't everything people do on the job. It doesn't capture the essence of what it means to be an accounting professor or electrical engineer. There's usually something more to a job than the tasks that you are assigned to do. Further, it's not clear where you should draw the line between jobs. So this could mean this could cause folks to miss similarities in jobs due to the high level of task specificity, which is why we have an alternative approach to job analysis. So the alternative is the worker-oriented approach, and it focuses on just that, the worker. Basically, there's a focus on examining broad human behaviors involved in work activities, the physical, interpersonal, and mental factors folks need to have in order to complete this job. The formal names of these attributes are knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics. And we're going to be talking about three different types of worker-oriented approaches. But first, let's talk about these knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics, or as they're better known as KSAOs. So the worker-oriented approach seeks to understand what a good worker looks like. And in order to do that, these methods heavily rely on identifying attributes of the person. And so these attributes are knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics. Basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. Knowledge, in order to do this job well, you have to have a requisite set of knowledge. So knowledge represents the information. You have the information needed to complete the task. Skills represent that you have the capabilities to perform this task proficiently. Abilities is that you have these underlying characteristics that are not necessarily trainable to do the job. So you have the propensity to do the job. This is like your intelligence, physical strength, etc. And then you have this kind of grab bag potpourri mix of other characteristics. You have the je ne sais quoi that allows you to perform the task well. So these are your values, your personality, kind of other characteristics that don't necessarily fit into the KSA buckets. A little history used to be just KSAs, and then you realized that there was something else that you needed, and so they threw on this other characteristics down at the end there. I don't know, that was probably around the 60s or something. So first up is the job element method. Now I know at the beginning of this lecture we defined element as the smallest work unit, but that's not what it means here. Element here refers to the KSAs for doing the job. So it's the job KSA method, I guess, didn't flow off the tongue very well. And as you can see, the goal of this method changed from focusing on the task to focusing on the worker. So what does, let's see if I, yep, there we go. What does amazing worker look like doing this job? However, it does use some of the same sources. We asked SMEs to develop a list of job elements and sub-elements, and then we asked them to provide examples in which these KSAs, remember KSAs, not job element or elements, these KSAs are used to are tied to specific work tasks. And one particular con of this method is that it may ignore specific job tasks. That is, a KSA, the KSAO can be related to any number of particular job tasks. So once identified, you may not need to tie that particular KSA to other job tasks. So those job tasks may not be brought up during these interviews. But let's take a look at an example of let's not use Holden this time. Wait, let me see if I can do this. No, I can't. Maybe I'll figure that out a little bit. Wait, there we go. Boom. Not this time, Holden. Let's take a look at another example. All right, let's take a look at professor. But we've used these graphics before, so I want to mix it. Holden, that's much better. What you're seeing here are two future professors and their stylistic choices as when they were undergrads. One is your current professor, looking rather dashing there, and another is a professor of clinical psychology over at Emory. So we are clearly communicating with our clothing here, and funny enough, that the ability to communicate clearly is needed by professors, typically through both verbal and visual mechanisms. And this ability can be tied to our proficiency to perform various tasks, which include, doing these lectures, emails, journal publications, grant proposals, and of course, effective use of memes, which you can make comments on in your evaluations at the end of the semester. Let me know how ineffectively I use them. Another example of a worker-oriented method is the position analysis questionnaire, which sounds like a ton of fun, and let me tell you, it is. It's technically the best known job analysis method, so huzzah for that, I guess. It has a wiki page, so that's something. Anyways, it asks the SMEs to answer about 187 questions, getting at 6 dimensions of the job, which are information input, mental processes, work output, relationships with other persons, job context, and other characteristics, right here on your slide. Anywho, those sound oddly like KSAOs, probably for good reason, right? They're all elements of the person for the most part. So while it is relatively easy to administer these PAQ, which is why it's probably one of the most used job analysis methods, it comes with some pretty big cons. One, who wants to answer 187 questions? That doesn't sound super fun, and it sounds incredibly arduous. Second of all, it requires a college reading level, which isn't super great if you're asking someone for these lower level positions, but also it doesn't seem to work for managerial jobs, which is kind of odd considering these managerial jobs usually require college level degrees. That could mean a couple things. Mostly that your manager doesn't have a college level reading level. Apparently your professor doesn't have a college level speaking level. Anyways, the items can be super abstract as well because they're used to generalize across various different job. So the PAQ is a off-the-shelf sort of approach, right? So it can be applied to various different jobs, but a con of that is that it's the items are super abstract. Now, to resolve this, some folks decided that we want to develop the Common Metric Questionnaire. Cool. In particular, these folks tried to improve the abstractness problem and ensure that the ratings were consistent across all jobs, which was an issue here. So to an extent, it worked, right? The items are behaviorally specific, which the PAQ was not necessarily. The reading level was also lower, right, which is great, and it seemed to be relevant it worked for multiple jobs. The downside is that it was 2,077 items organized by 80 dimensions because, of course, we need 80 dimensions here. Now, while the official time provided by the book suggests it takes about 3 hours per job to complete, I call bullshit on that one, as that would mean that people are filling out these questions at a rate of 11.5 questions per second. Anyways, these methods are okay, but there is another. There's another one. One more thing. Steve Jobs. Now let's just go to the next slide. All right, so I may have lied to you about there only being two different approaches to job analysis. There is a third, and it's likely the best, and it's called the hybrid approach. Now the hybrid approach uses both task and worker-oriented methods to do the job analysis, and it was the basis of the successor of the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, entitled ONET, Occupational Information Network. Now, ONET is awesome, not only because it provides a database of over 950 occupations with all of this information, and I dork out about IO stuff. It has a ton of resources, information and resources for those interested in pursuing these occupations. So let's click on a link so I can show you what it looks like for a college professor. Let's change it from laser pointer to regular pointer. Okay. Let's do mechanical engineer, see if that link works. That's not, what's that? Holden's back. Well, I guess this time we're not looking at college professor or mechanical engineer. Let's go ahead and look at barista. Boop.
All right, so here is the ONET report for barista, and as you can see, it does talk about the specific tasks that you'd want to have, that you would do on the job. It shows you things like related occupations for particular tasks. You can look at the technical skills that you need for the job, the knowledge, technology skills, that you need for the job, the knowledge that you need for the job, the skills, the abilities, all of these things, work activities, and it provides a lot of information. We have this job zone stuff here, what education you need. For more substantive or meaningful jobs, you can look at credentials that you can get and apprenticeships that you can get with particular jobs. Really don't need that here. You can see how it aligns with the interest question, your interests, enterprising, conventional, realistic. If you're ever interested in what your interests are, you can take this ONET interest profiler, and it'll say, oh, you're interested in A, B, C, D. I'm sorry. These 6 different sorts of occupational interests, what work values there are, etc. The median wage, you can select what state and look at the wages there, and see it's not super great. Hourly, well, yeah, not super great. better to be barista, I guess, somewhere else. Maybe New York? Did they get paid more there? Yeah, just a little bit. Anywho, all right. So you can get tons and tons of information. This is just on barista, and you can find job openings and what have you. If you scroll all the way back at the top, this is just a summary. You can get even more detailed information about the job. So how important this particular task is to the job. You see your task-oriented methods there, the knowledge that you need. You see your worker-oriented methods there, the skills that you need, worker-oriented, how important it is, etc. So it's a really nice, detailed bit of resources for those of you who haven't decided what you want to do with your life yet. Yeah, but there's some people out there who think that job analysis is complete trash. What? That's right. The foundation of IO psychology, the most important topic, is basically equivalent to 2020. So what are these people thinking? I'll tell you a bit right after this lecture break.
Hey there, and thanks for gifting yourself these next few minutes. It's important to remember that you're a priority, and allowing yourself even just a few short minutes of intentional reflection can really have a positive impact on the rest of your day. So let's use these next few minutes to come back to center and set an intention for the rest of your day. Move into a comfortable position, whether you're seated at your desk at work or laying on the couch at home, and gently close your eyes and shift all of your attention onto your breathing, taking slower, deeper breaths than you've taken all day so far, taking a deep breath in through your nose and slowly letting it out through your mouth. And continuing to breathe that way, feeling your lungs expand out as you inhale and contract back in as you exhale. Tune into your body, noticing how it feels, noticing if there's anything that it's trying to tell you. Notice any place of tension or tightness in your body, and give those areas permission to relax, sending love into those areas. Thank your body for taking such good care of you, and let it know that it's okay to rest and relax for these next few minutes. You may notice that your mind starts to wander off. That's okay. That's natural. Just notice it and bring your attention back to your body, using your breath as your anchor. Try to picture one thing that's happened today that's made you smile, or made you thankful or appreciative. And just let that feeling fill you up for a moment. Breathe that feeling in from the top of your head to the tips of your toes. And allow yourself to smile if that feels natural. Now focus on something that you can do today, whether it's for yourself or for someone else, that will allow you to continue feeling this way. It could be something as small as deciding to go to bed early tonight, so that you have time to finally read that book that's been on your bedside table, or the joy of getting dinner with a close friend. What's one little thing you can plan for your day to bring that intentional joy to it? Now just focus on that for a few minutes. Sit in that feeling of joy and peace. Now let's take a few more deep breaths together. A deep breath in, feeling your lungs expand out as you inhale, and everything contract back in as you exhale. Again, an even deeper breath than the one before it, holding that breath for a beat, and exhaling everything out. Last time, your deepest breath yet, sending that breath through your entire body. And exhale it out. And in your own time, slowly bring your awareness back to where you are. And thank yourself for taking these few minutes to just be intentional and kind to yourself. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes and enjoy the rest of your day.
Well, I know you guys were waiting on pins and needles for me to talk about the method of conducting job analysis, or why job analysis was complete trash, and the reason for that is competency modeling. So that's the topic we're going to be touching on next. So now it's true that competency modeling is generally replacing job analysis. Instead of being task or worker oriented, competency modeling can be thought of as organization oriented, right? So it not only gets at the KSAOs at the job, but also the responsibilities and business challenges that are relevant for a particular organization. And let's bring out the laser. Boom. All right. So here's a quick breakdown of the differences. While the purpose of a job analysis is to describe what the workers are currently doing, a competency modeling approach additionally looks at the ways of how to influence the behavior, which can be great from a developmental purpose. So not only what workers do, but how do you change what they do, hopefully in a better way. The view of the job is also different. With job analysis considering the job as an object to be described, whereas competency modeling thinks of it as a role to be enacted. And I mentioned earlier how the focus has changed from the job to the organization in competency modeling, and that can be seen here too already. But that also sort of means that the time orientation is different as well. So job analysis focuses on what has been done in the past, whereas competency modeling looks at on what will be needed or should be done in the future with respect to a particular job. Importantly, job analysis seeks to understand what employees do typically on the job, and competency modeling looks at what an exemplar performer looks like. For instance, what would the best professor look like at Georgia Tech, besides me, of course? Competency modeling is not only concerned with how well they're doing a set of tasks, but how integral is that to what epitomizes an ideal professor? So what that would look like. So it's identifying these things is the important for competency modeling as opposed to um, job analysis. Identifying what a ideal professor is important to competency modeling. That's that maximum performance there. The measurement approach is a bit different too. So job analysis focuses on a latent trait. For example, Jane is good at leadership, which is a single latent trait, mentoring, another latent trait, and decision making, a latent trait. So 3 different latent traits. Competency modeling seeks to provide a job with a single, and those who hold it, a single overriding score. So combines these different latent traits to ask the question, like, is Jane a good manager? So all of those traits are, anyways. Yeah.
So I know what you're thinking. Well, actually I don't, because I'm at the end of my walk and I'm too tired to think of a good segue. But let's assume I know what you're thinking, and you're thinking, so Dr. Weiss, what's in it for the organization? Why are we going to reach out to these IO psychologists and pay them money to bring them in to our organization to tell us what jobs we have, essentially? What are the components of those jobs? Well, that's a great question, student who's up at 2 a.m. who should probably go to bed instead of watching this lecture because sleep is related to your well-being. Super question.
So we covered this a little bit at the beginning, right? As I know before, job analysis has various outcomes. Two sort of, I guess, more minor outcomes, but still outcomes nonetheless, are job description, which provides a written statement of what the job holder does, how they do it, and why they do it. It provides task requirements of the job. And job specification delineates the KSAOs needed to perform a specific job. And I know what you're thinking if you're the organization. Cool. That's nice and all. Okay, somebody just fell upstairs. No crying, no crying, no crying. Okay, we're good. That's nice and all, but give me something about money, right? We're in a capitalistic society. I am a big CEO, manager, whatever sort of person. Tell me how job analysis can help me make decisions about money. So here you go, the job evaluation, which provides the worth of a job to the organization and can drastically affect salaries. Now, there are 2 different points I'd like to make here regarding job evaluation. First is how it's done via a point system. And we're going to go into details about that in just a second, as well as this idea of comparable worth, which can help reveal some discrepancy between how much men and women and other groups, honestly, how much they get paid. So the point system for job evaluation, here are the steps, right? So you have SMEs. That's the second hipster barista image that came up with Google search, though he doesn't look like a barista thing. Anyways, so you use SMEs. SMEs use job analysis to identify the compensatable factors, and then these jobs are assigned points by a compensation committee based upon these factors. Points are assigned to each job, and then they're summed up across a number of factors to arrive at a total score. Points are then assigned to are used to assign wages. And then the plotting happens. So this is an example of the plotting that occurs. So here's the results of the job analysis, so this point system job evaluation. So here is perfect wage equity, which means that, if they got X amount of points, they should be making $5 an hour. If they make 125 points, then they should make 625, etc., and so forth. And these lines right here represent the what people are, I guess, currently being paid. So those who got 100 points using this point system um, are earning, I don't know, around 8 something an hour are being overpaid, while those who earned a high amount of points and are below this perfect wage equity are being underpaid. So that is what the point system of job evaluation allows you to determine. Now, another related factor to job evaluation is comparable worth. Um, So in particular, knowing the worth of how much a position should be versus how much they're getting paid started to reveal some disturbing findings. So even though the Equal Pay Act, which stipulates that men and women who do equal work must receive equal pay, was established in 1963, as of 2014, there's still this big wage discrepancy of about 21 men earn 21% more than women. However, it's important to note that the Equal Pay Act does not necessarily address gender differences across dissimilar jobs. That is, from historical context, jobs that men traditionally hold typically pay more than those held by women and are subjectively valued as being more important to organizations than the jobs held by women, which brings up the doctrine of comparable worth. So the idea here is that jobs of equal worth to the organization should be compensated equally, no matter the gender that typically held these positions. Since job evaluations focuses on the actual behaviors rather than to what the market considers to be valuable, it should technically decrease biases in compensation, but we've yet to see that come full circle. Beyond compensation, the purposes for job analysis are there are many other purposes for job uh, analyses. Up first is legal. Now we're going to go into an example here. Griggs versus Duke Power Company. Now, if you haven't heard of this, let me provide some context. Duke Power had some pretty messed up selection and promotion practices. Essentially, when they would select black employees, they would be assigned to the labor department. And within the labor department, the highest paid labor position was getting paid less than the lowest paying position in the 4 other departments that Duke Power had. As another like really not super great, in other words terrible policy, is that you needed to have a high school diploma and pass 2 aptitude tests in order to be transferred or promoted within the company. During this time, white males were 3 times as likely to hold a high school diploma as black males, so they're obviously not great numbers there. And the aptitude tests were not super great either. So one of the aptitude tests was a mechanical aptitude test, which was not related to the other jobs that they would be performing. So essentially just a barrier to put in there. Kind of like it was not related to the jobs that they would transfer into. Also, the Wonderlic cognitive ability test, which was another one that they needed to complete to be promoted or transferred, was shown to be discriminatory against black individuals. And so that's not great. And Willie Griggs and a bunch of petitioners brought a case to the District Supreme Court. And the District Supreme Court ruled that, Duke is not being wrong because, it wasn't intentional. They were doing this for the purposes of the job, and so yeah, your Duke is fine. And so this case went up to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court case, it got sent up to the Supreme Court in December of 1970, and they finally made a final decision about it in March 8th, 1971. Now, this was the first real example of examination of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which addressed equal employment opportunities regardless of your race, and we'll get to that in more detail a little bit later. Um, and it ruled essentially that unintentional discrimination is still unlawful, and that there were no ties between the test that they used for selection and performance, or selection and promotion, and job performance. The conclusion of this court case was that the burden of proof of demonstrating the job relatedness of the practices, so the policies, the selection and promotion instruments, is the burden of providing proof that it is linked to the job falls on the organization. It should not fall on the employee. And they basically said you need to do a job analysis demonstrating that these things are related to what you're saying they are. And they couldn't, and so they failed. I hope nothing bad happened to that plant that they were working at. Another example of a legal case is Paper Company versus Moody in 1975. Again, blacks are being discriminated against because of unjust hiring practices, use of the cognitive ability measure. And the paper company said, no, no, we're not. And then the Supreme Court said, did you do a job analysis linking the tested job? And they're like, we did a validation study which showed that it's related to some things, but not necessarily job performance. It's like, yeah, that's not a job analysis. You got to do your due diligence, and yeah. So doing a job analysis is important for legal reasons. It can also help with job classification, helps organize jobs into families, better able to compare jobs, treat them the same in terms of benefits. It can allow for better development of criterion, which can help with performance appraisals. So, what are the goals of this position, the objectives, and how is the employee going to be evaluated on their accomplishment of these goals and objectives? It could also be used for developmental purposes in that respect too. And of course, selection and placement. That's where IO's bread and butter essentially are, or it were. I don't know anymore. But the KSAOs can be used to select folks and place them into the appropriate place within the organization. Job design and redesign. Is there a problem with this job? How do we fix it? That's becoming a big topic of interest right now, with people being able to control, say, how the job is done, where the responsibilities fall, bringing up that this may not necessarily fall within the bucket of my responsibilities. The job analysis will help clarify that for folks, as well as training. I highlighted development in a second ago. So, like, what are the deficiencies? How do we improve on the deficiencies of a particular employee, or is that through job redesign, or is that through training the employee on how to do X, Y, and Z, whatever those things are? And that's it. I have a visitor at my recording studio, and I'll get to her in just a second. But that's it for job analysis.
Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed that lecture on job analysis. You kind of out of the woods there. So yeah, let's just talk about what's coming up for your due dates, like on the 29th. So if you're on schedule, that's a week from today. We have your discussion questions due. There'll be a announcement in Canvas and all that jazz, but the general idea is whatever you want to talk about relevant to chapters 3, 4, and 5, have questions about that. Then the TAs and I will synthesize those, and then on February 3rd, we'll be coming together to have a discussion on 2 of those topics. We'll come together and pick which ones are best. So on February 3rd, you need to be in class. Just a reminder, you'll get lots more. But also on February 3rd, your quizzes for chapters 3, 4, and 5 are due. A lot of the answers to these quizzes are going to be from the lecture. A lot of them are from the book. So just be prepared for that. They're due at 11:59. All quizzes are. But yeah, hope you're having a good one, and see you soon.